So in 2013, my parents confronted me with what they should do, or what I wanted to do with an inheritance that I was going to be getting from them when they passed away. And they said it wasn't a lot of money, but there was a little bit there. So I said, well, instead of it just sitting in a bank and then when you guys pass, I'd just more than likely just get it and blow it, spend it on nothing in particular, waste it away. I thought I would go ahead and invest it and use it now while I could. So I decided to buy and install a 9.36 kW solar photovoltaic power generation system for my property. I've been living in the house here since 2009 by myself when my parents moved and went into retirement homes. So I went ahead and installed a 9.36 kW solar array and grid tied it to the electric company to generate power and have it offset the months that I used more than I made. So hopefully by the end of each year I would have basically a zero bill, where I would produce as much during the heavy production months that would offset the months that I used more for air conditioning and heating. So my electric company here in Comal County is owned by the city of San Antonio. It's called City Public Service, and I had to grid tie with them because they're the only electric provider in the area. So before I installed the system, I had a meeting with the head engineers at CPS Energy and questioned them regarding the new smart meters that were going to be installed in America. I knew they were coming. I used to be an electrician, residential, commercial, industrial in San Antonio. I was licensed with the city, so I had a green card. Not a green card as an immigrant, but an electrician's green card. So I knew about smart meters. I knew that they had the capability of controlling electrical equipment. And I was putting in a solar array, and I didn't want anybody to be able to shut me off if anything happened. My mom was going to be coming here, my dad, and my mom's on oxygen, so the last thing I needed is in an emergency having them here and somebody turning off my power. So I questioned the chief engineer about that, and he point blank informed me no, there would be no control of my equipment with the smart meter, and that if anything, they were prevented from doing it because there was a federal law or something like that not allowing them to. So I took their word at it and went ahead and I installed my system. Went active November 2013. I had purchased a Outback radiant system, which is it's meant for like people who live on islands or small microgrids in foreign countries, where they could generate their own electrical grid, and it would track everything. Any alarms that went off in the system, any bad switchings, just everything. It tracked everything, basically. It had a computer brain in it that tracked everything. And it recorded it all on SD card, and it couldn't be erased. And the only way to access it was to access it through the manual device at the actual system. I mean, you can monitor it online, but you couldn't access it per se to where you could delete the data and change the data, I thought. So the system that I put in was working great for November, December, January, February, March. In April, I had my first alarm on the system, and it was an alarm for a remote control. It said remote up and remote down, a remote down, remote up, and it was just that one alarm. Never happened again. I kind of wrote it off as maybe a fluke in the system, or just an anomaly, because it was the only one that ever happened, and it never happened again. So when July came around, I started getting daily alarms, and they were basically the same thing. It would be a remote up, remote down, and then there would be all these entries on my log afterwards. I mean, multiple entries. And the weird thing was, is the entries always matched what the remote was for, up and down. It would have a label that came with it saying what the reason was for it doing what it did. So I would get day after day after day the entire month of July of these remote accesses to my system. So I thought something strange was up, and I went out one night, I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a strange noise coming from my solar room, and the router was making the worst noise I'd ever heard. It was like, and my solar inverter was on. There's no sun out, so it shouldn't have been on. And it was connected to the grid, which is another strange thing, because it only should connect to the grid when it's generating power. So I took a video of it and contacted the manufacturer and inquired on what was going on, and they couldn't tell me. But they didn't tell me they couldn't tell me because they couldn't tell me. They told me that they just couldn't tell me what was going on because they didn't know. But I now know that that's not the truth. In August, when I got my July bill, my bill was the same amount it was as before I ever installed the solar. So I paid the exact same amount of money, but I generated, gosh, almost like 2,000 kilowatt hours for the whole month, which is more than my normal usage for each month. So I didn't pay the bill. I disputed the bill, contacted the electric company, told them I wanted them to come out and inspect my equipment, that there was something wrong with it, informed them what was going on. They never did come out, never would schedule somebody to come out and to inspect the gear. If anything, they just ignored me. August, the same thing happened in August. September comes around, and I start going out and shutting off the system at night, physically, to where it can't be turned on, and do the manual disconnect on it, you know, with the actually flipping the breaker down on the breaker box. So whatever was going on, I at least stopped it at night. October comes, and October 2nd, or I think October 2nd or October 5th, well, while that was going on, I ordered a whole bunch of individual meters that measured each individual breaker, or leg, as they call them, or circuit breaker, basically, each individual circuit breaker in the box, and it would connect between the panel and the circuit breaker, so you can measure the actual electricity coming off of the panel and going into that circuit that was feeding whatever circuit it was in the house. So I would be able to individually track my actual usage across all my circuits and know how much I'm actually physically using in my house and where all the rest is going. So before I could get the very last meter installed, I had a fire in my electric box, like you see on TV or you hear about with the smart meters, fires in people's electrical panels. Well, I had a fire in mine. Fortunately for me, I was there that morning, and I was watching the equipment when I noticed it starting to smoke. And it was actually, the meter was preventing the dirty electricity, as they call it, dirty power, from going on to the electric circuit, because the meters that I purchased were only certified for real power. They weren't certified for reactive power. So the magnetic anomalous power that they call dirty energy, dirty power, was stopped at that point on the wire, and it would build up heat, and it started a fire, which is more than likely what was happening in these fires at these houses with all the smart meters. They say it comes from the switch mode power supply, but that's what generates that dirty power. It's DC power from AC that's put onto the electric line. So, and I come to find out now that that's how they were actually activating my solar equipment, was with that dirty power. It would fake the DC signal into the solar inverter, and it would see this DC power and think it was coming from the sun, and turn on and activate the system. And they did that so they could use my solar array to balance the grid. They would dump that dirty power, that reactive energy, off onto my solar array to have it dissipate out of my solar panels. And when they did that, it had to replace the actual power that I had. My batteries was being drained. So it was kind of strange, because I wasn't taking any real power from the electric company. They were dumping their reactive on me, and I was using my battery power for my inverter. So then when the morning would come around, when I would go to charge the batteries would be depleted instead of being fully charged, and maintain at float level. So I was having to recharge the batteries every single day, and when they reset did the remote reset on it, it didn't charge from the sun. It recharged my batteries from the from the grid. So not only was I not generating power, I was buying power to charge my batteries instead of charging it from the sun, from solar. So that's why my electric bill was so high, even though I generated all the power I did. So I was still having to buy back power. And not only that, they would turn it on right at the peak time of day, so I would be buying it back at the highest rate possible from them. And then they would be making me use my own power at night instead of me using the grid. So when the next morning came, of course I was having to charge my batteries, and they wouldn't charge. They would turn me on to charge at peak time of the day, so I wasn't generating that whole day. So I was losing money. Yeah, big time. And I was being taken advantage of, and they were stealing, using my equipment, and never notified me. I gave them no authorization to use my equipment for their own purposes. So when I found out what was going on, and I didn't really find out about that until after October, when I was replacing the meters, individual meters in the panel. Well, of course, I'm right in front of that meter for hours. It'd take me like an hour to do one meter, so I was there multiple hours. And come to find out that there's a health warning on those things, and they didn't put it on the meter saying, only a certain amount of time you need to be in front of this meter because it emits radiation, and anything prolonged beyond that, you're damaging yourself, your body. And I didn't know that, and thought it was just a regular meter. I had no idea. Nobody told me. Nobody informed me. They just did it one day. All of a sudden, now I got this digital meter, unknown that it was a smart meter, but I knew it was a digital meter. And so, because I have a titanium plate implanted in my hip, on my right femur from a bicycling accident back in 2008, I have the metal. When you're around reactive radiation or magnetic energy, instead of it going through your body on that plate, it actually collects on that plate and turns into heat. The plate will stop that radiation from going through the body and absorb it into the metal, and that metal becomes hot and starts to dissipate the heat into your body. It created quite a bit of medical issue for me because it's along the sciatic nerve, which is the main nervous route of transmission of signals in your body. I was getting nosebleeds out of nowhere in the middle of the day. Got to a point where I had problems walking. I was having to wear knee braces on both legs. Couldn't read anymore up close. I'd have to get a magnifying glass or use 2.5 power reading glasses. And I never had a problem with my eyes since I was like 15 because I had corrective lenses and corrected the problem, which has been wiped away like it was never corrected. So put me right back where I was when I was 15. I have problems now where I can't read up close because of this. What else happened? Oh yeah, it induced a heart attack in me. Go figure. And I ended up in the hospital being taken by ambulance from the Social Security office one day in October. The engineer, the paramedic, the engineer, city fire department sends their ambulance for me, and they put me on the EEG. And they go, geez, man, we ain't never seen a reading like that. We need to get to the hospital immediately. So they took me, code 3, lights and siren, straight to the emergency room to the closest hospital. And they admitted me, kept me overnight. The doctor said that there was something going on. They weren't sure what was going on. They were taking blood from me every half hour. They were checking my blood levels every half hour for the first 16 hours that I was in the hospital. So I knew something was up. Because they don't pull blood work like that unless they're tracking something, and they're monitoring very closely. So that evening, the doctor comes into the room and tells me that I've had a cardiac event, an event, and is requesting that I do a stress test in the morning. And because I'm disabled, they don't want to give me the physical stress test, so they give me what's called a medication-induced stress test. In other words, they give you medication that makes the heart work as fast as if you were actually physically exercising, so they can test the heart with the stress test. So the next morning, I'm feeling a lot better than I was the day before. The day before, I had a real problem. It was bad. It was real bad. I couldn't breathe. It was like somebody was standing on my chest. An elephant was standing on my chest. And I grew up with asthma, so I know when you can't breathe, it sucks. But I know the experience because I grew up with asthma, and I used to not be able to breathe when I was little. But I had outgrown that by the time I was 12. And but here I was with that same feeling of can't breathe, help. And yeah, it was not a fun feeling. but I didn't have the normal tingliness in the one side of the body, the headache before. You know, normally you get a slight headache before it happens. One side of your body will go numb or tingly. You get the sensations that you're having a heart attack. I didn't have none of that. I was just standing there, and all of a sudden I felt like I needed to get out of the building and get some fresh air. I was having a hard time breathing. And by the time I walked down the hallway, around the corner, and got to the security checkpoint in the building at Social Security, I collapsed in front of the security checkpoint. And the girl that was there, the security officer, you know, she was helping me. And all I could say is, I'm so hot. I'm on fire. I'm burning up. I just remember being hot, like I was sitting in a fire. And she's sitting there fanning me with her papers, trying to keep me cool till the ambulance got there. And but that was the strangest thing, because, you know, if you have a heart attack, you don't get hot feeling, you get cold. Everything gets cold, not hot. So the hot feeling was the reactive energy that had been, you know, put upon me for the last few months, and it builds up over time. It doesn't just happen overnight. It takes a period of time for the body to actually become affected from the radiation. There's studies online. If you go to takebackyourpower.org, Take Back Your Power is a movie that the guys made about the smart meters. They do a really good job of explaining the degradation to the cells in the body, blood cells in the body, from the exposure of the radiation. So, and it's not a nuclear radiation. It's a thermal radiation, or it's actually a radio frequency, which is what it is. It's a powered electricity going through the air in a sound wave that's passing through your body, and it's a form of radiation because it's radiating electricity as a sound wave, and it's carrying through the air and it's coming through your body. So, you know, I know now, had I not had the metal implant in my body, I wouldn't have the effects that I had at that time. So, but that let me know something really drastic was going on here at my house, and that informed me to do investigation on the smart meters. So when it was determined it was smart meters, I contacted the city of San Antonio, told them to take them out, gave them a cease and desist, a certain time to respond by 30 days, I think, something like that. And if they failed to, that I would remedy it myself, which I ended up having to do. I ended up having to take the meter out and put in brand new analog meters from General Electric that I had to purchase, which were the only last two in America because they stopped manufacturing them because the government mandated that only smart meters could be made now. So it was very hard finding the last two GE brand new meters that had never been used, and I installed them, you know, 0000 on the monitor on the wheel. So, but it was irrelevant. They came out 6 days later, turned off my power, took my meters, locked my boxes with locks on them, and then left while I wasn't home. They did it in the morning while I wasn't home, and so that week. I ended up losing the food in my fridge because for some reason my solar was only working during the day, and I'd run out of power every night. And I couldn't figure out how come I'm running out of power. I should be able to have power stored for all night long and during the day. And that's why I bought the system I did and put it in the battery bank I did. But they were still continuing to access the remotely through my inverter and turning my system on and off, even though I wasn't connected to the grid. And they were basically, you know, punishing me. They were preventing me from using power normally, storing my own power. And that's when I realized that it was turning on and you know, shutting off, and then when it come on, it would reset, thinking it was connected as an UPS. It wouldn't charge the batteries from the sun. It would only charge it from the grid. I wasn't connected to the grid, so my batteries weren't charging. That's what that ended up being. And I found out after the fact, I mean, like in January, because the whole month of November, December, and it was cold in December, let me tell you, with no heat, no electricity, it was real cold. So, but I found out. And, you know, they helped me find out what was going on, and I did. So I filed on the city of San Antonio for the theft of my power and for exposing me to radiation that put me in a hospital, almost killed me. And the city ambulance bill from the city of San Antonio, they tried billing me for it, and I never paid it, and they just finally just wrote it off. I think they realized since I was suing them for it, they weren't going to get it. So.